Ladies and gentlemen, from La Casa de los Lobos, the Pit, here at the University of New Mexico, let's get ready to rumble!
I got to do Harry Carey one more time. Sorry about that. Ed, am I sounding good?
Absolutely great. With Harry Carey, that brings back a lot of memories. Yeah, it really does.
If the I saw him once in the 90s.
Really?
Oh yeah. We drove across country and to New Jersey, and my dad had to stop at Wrigley Field because when he moved out to Albuquerque, he got WGN. He fell in love with the Cubs, but he was a Yankee Mets fan. But that cracks me up every time. I love it. In the skit, one of the skits, he asked Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum is on playing a astrophysicist or something, and he goes, if you were, I'm butchering it, but he asked him if he would eat the moon if it was made out of spare ribs or something. I don't remember specifically, but I can just see him shaking his head. Okay, that's not a great way to start because I'm not a comedian. My name's Ryan Tamori. Welcome to the Pit Press Live. Busy show today. Eric Moulton and Rick Thompson are going to be taking over at 4:30ish. Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org. He's going to preview tomorrow's big game, and we'll get into that. And where UNM sits bracketology-wise is probably well as the rest of the Mountain West Conference. Friend of the show, Tom Moser, amigo of the show, excuse me. Tom Moser had Rocco Miller on his show and I think had a hand in the VCU game. I don't know if Eric and Rick are going to ask about that, but that was pretty cool to learn today. Ed, I'll get to you here in a second. A lot of coaching news with former UNM football coaches today, and one of the best news stories I've seen in the first 10 days of this year. And I know I made this joke on Monday, but Larry David said he can't wish Happy New Year after the 7th. But anyway,
Happy New Year
to Bill Murray and Ghostbusters too. I do want to thank people that make this show possible. Dulce River Bakery and Coffee, Affordable Solar, Turquoise Desert Tap Room, Hydro Bar, Affordable Service Heating, Plumbing, and Air Conditioning for your HVAC needs in the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho area. Affordable Service has been in business in in New Mexico since 1986, and it is still locally owned. During that time, they've served more than 40,000 customers, providing complete residential and light commercial HVAC services, including heating, cooling, electrical, and plumbing. Affordable Service takes pride in its staff and commitment to the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho area. Appreciate all of our sponsors. Again, Ed and I are going to be here till about 4:30ish, and then Eric and Rick are going to jump on with Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org, talk all things college basketball, the San Diego State game tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Big Boy CBS, not CBS Sports. But we're going to backtrack a little bit here. and haven't talked to this guy since last year. So happy New Year to the voice of the Western New Mexico Mustangs and a Lobo fan since 1970. His name is Mr. Ed Nunez. Ed, how you doing?
Doing great, Ryan. You mentioned a lot of things to talk about, and let's get to it because I know Rick and Eric have their guests at 4:30. So, yeah, a lot of things to get into today.
I wanted to get your thoughts on I know we're backtracking. I wanted to get your thoughts on the Wyoming game, Ed, and the comeback. You know, UNM erased 12 points. Just your thoughts.
I went back and watched it on the replay because I was doing some games at the Metro tournament. New Mexico couldn't have shot any worse in the first half. 1 of 16. They couldn't buy a bucket. They looked bad in the first half. In the second half, Wyoming had the lead late, 49-45, even deep in the second half. Donovan did, got going, made some great shots. Nelly Jr. Joseph in the first half had no explosiveness, no footwork. He didn't look good. And in the second half, he became Nelly Jr. Joseph. Amzil and True Washington, 1 of 14. You mentioned that the other day between them. No shots for Applehounds. Applehounds got no shots, no looks up. That can't happen. They need him to get at least 5 to 7 shots up a game, at least. Milicevic.
You got me saying Milicevic.
Milicevic, I was almost with that. He's played a lot better. He looks a lot more confident. So does Borovichinen. Very confident now. Look at the way he's playing. Earlier in the year, he was looking at the bench if he was going to come out now. I see him clapping, looking around, being confident. So I thought they played very well. But both of them are showing more confidence. Milicevic has a nice stroke. Got to shoot more. Tiki has kind of taken a step back. Somebody mentioned that he doesn't seem like he's a rim protector that he was, a rim runner. I don't know what's going on with him, but they need him tomorrow because San Diego State has size. So that's my quick thoughts on Wyoming. New Mexico avoided a trap loss there, and Wyoming, being without their leading scorer, played a good first half, not so much the second half. And I got to love Sundance Wicks. Love that name. Love him too, and loved watching him. He's entertaining.
It's definitely one of the better names in all of college basketball. Tomorrow morning, a bigger game. I saw somebody on Twitter getting into it with Jeff Grammer, dancing Aggie NMSU. Maybe I'll start here, Ed. What's a bigger? I don't even know if it's a bigger rivalry. I think we all know it's probably New Mexico State, but I guess if you want it to be pretty nitpicky about it, that San Diego State is probably the biggest rivalry within the conference. Would you agree or disagree?
I would definitely. Jeff Grammer had a great article in the paper today talking about the rivalry. It's 3-3 since Pitino's been here. But yes, I would say San Diego State for sure. You mentioned some of the players from the past for San Diego State on the show the other day, Kawhi Leonard being one of them. And yeah, I would definitely say it's San Diego State for sure. And I'm going to tell you something. New Mexico is going to have their hands full tomorrow. They really are.
What are you looking for most tomorrow? I mean, obviously, 11 a.m. CBS. I know I've beat that to death, but Ed, what are you looking for tomorrow morning?
They've got Miles Bird at 13.3 points. Nick Boyd, who I like him, a lefty at 13.2. They've got BJ Davis at 10.4 points. Coleman Jones is 6'10". Jared Coleman Jones, 6'10", 7.4 points, 5.5 rebounds. Farrell Compton brings some size off the bench at 6'8". He's 6.8 points and 3.3 rebounds. They've got some other size off of the bench as well with Wayne McKinney. He's 6'7". They've got another 6'8" guy. They've got size. They do. They've got some size. And Coleman Jones and Farrell Compton can definitely, Coleman Jones at 6'10" might give Nelly some work down there. Nelly's going to have to really play a good game. Then they've got, we mentioned Farrell Compton. He's 6'8". So they're long, lanky, they're athletic. I don't think it's anything new that the roster that they've had before. They avoided, they had Utah State up, number 25, Utah State up by 7 with 90 seconds left, and they let it get away. They went on the road and beat Boise State, and then they were down to Air Force 20-8 and avoided a trap loss there. They're a good team. I like Miles Bird a lot. I really do. He's a lefty. Shoots 85% from the free throw line. BJ Davis shoots 84% from the free throw line. So those aren't guys that you're going to want to foul. 24 threes on the season for Miles Bird, 25 threes for Nick Bird. I'm sorry, Miles Byrd, Nick Boyd, 25 threes. That's going to be a tough game for New Mexico. And I think with Amzil having the bad game, he had a bad game. He looked totally. I got to say this: he had some open shots he missed, and in the lane he got the ball a couple of times. And again, no explosiveness. Didn't get off the floor. He just looked a little lost out there. They need him to play much better. So they're going to have to, in the big men off the bench, Atiki Milicevic. I don't know what kind of a big game, but they need him. Milicevic has been playing very well lately. But I got to say this, Ryan. The guy that New Mexico needs to come out of this funk is True Washington. They need him tomorrow. Remember, before the season started, Coach Pitino had said he thought True could be the defensive player of the year in the Mountain West Conference. I don't know if you remember that, but he did say that. And we haven't seen a lot of that. I think sometimes when his offense is going, his defense leads to steals and points in transition. He struggled. They need him tomorrow because Miles Byrd and Nick Boyd are going to be a handful. Donovan, and I think Rick Thompson said it the other day. Defensively, they're going to give Donovan Dent a lot of looks, and inside with the size that they have, Nelly's not going to get easy post touches. He's going to have to work, and he did later on in the game against Wyoming. He's strong. I think sometimes we take it for granted that the guy's got 2% body fat. He's strong. He really is. And sometimes I don't think I give New Mexico enough credit for what they do. I'm always being kind of critical. They won against Wyoming, a good win. They avoided that trap loss. But tomorrow, they've got, this is a team. San Diego State beat number 12 Houston 73-70. They lost to Gonzaga, lost to Utah State in the game. They probably feel they should have won. They beat Boise State at Boise. So I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be a very good game. They average, they've hit 106 threes on the season. They average 38.6 rebounds per game. Rebounds are going to be key tomorrow, Ryan. So Amzil is bad, and he's not really a natural four. They made him play inside. It's going to be they're going to need rebounding and scoring from him. He's got to come out of that funk. And a lot of people were down on him, but remember, he's had more good games here than bad. So they're going to need him. And True Washington, really, they need at least, I want to say tomorrow, at least 14 to 16 points from True, along with some steals and defense on Boyd and Bird. Those guys are good. They really are. So it's going to be a very tough game for New Mexico. I'm looking forward to it, though. We call it what Dave Bliss, I hate to even bring Coach Bliss up, but he'd always call it a pit game. This is definitely a pit game tomorrow for sure.
Fernando Lobo tweeting out a little bit ago, and I saw there were about 1,000 tickets left. It's sold out now, officially as of 47 minutes ago. So that's Fernando Lobo's Twitter handle. I think there were a lot of questions when we went to Vegas in October about would this be the same San Diego State team, and I feel like Brian Dutcher just kind of reloads. Nick Boyd was at FAU, good guard there. Miles Byrd, I went back to the game last year, and I didn't know who Miles Byrd was at the time. He hit a couple of threes late. It's the old Chris Paul, hit a three up, hit a big three down 42 or whatever that shit was. But he hit a couple of threes late in that game in the pit last year, and I don't know, it impressed me. He wasn't phased or anything, so I thought he's going to be one of those guys, players that they get. Obviously, they don't. 2 years ago, Matt Bradley, Lamont Butler's at Kentucky. I don't know. They're still a good team. I think it's coaching, and they just get guys that play hard. I'm not a X's and O's basketball guy, but I don't know. They're always fun to watch. I'm excited. That game last year was pretty cool. I walked in late and I walked down the ramp, and it was a madhouse. And that is one of the things that I do like about, the pit, for as much expletive as I talk. I wanted to switch gears really quick at it. Again, don't know much. Vinny Cumber's names comes up. But I didn't realize this until Rick told me this. The Lady Lobos are 4-0 and they host UNLV on Sunday. So kudos to Mike Bradbury. They're 11-6 on the year. We haven't shown them much love. I was trying to get JJ Buck on the show. Maybe we can effort Mike Bradbury, but that's a good start. So you've got both men and women's teams starting off undefeated in conference play. And I guess very quickly, Ed, how important would it be with UNM to go start off 6-0 in conference play this year?
Jeff Grammer wrote an article about New Mexico and the Mountain West and back in the WAC back in the day, and about what teams were undefeated. And this late, it hasn't happened in a long time for New Mexico. I think it's important, especially you've got a game here nationally televised on CBS. So I think it's very important. And it's you mentioned it's a big rival of ours, San Diego State. So it's and I wanted to say that against Nevada, that Pitt Magic. I wasn't on with you when we talked about the Nevada game, and Nelly Jr. Joseph hitting the shot at the buzzer. And this is just the 1,000th game in the Pit, and Jeff Grammer talking about the top 10 games in the Pit. I don't know if that makes his top 10, but the Pit, man, that building's it's incredible. And sometimes I take it for granted because I've been in there so many times, and seen so many great games. And tomorrow I'm expecting to see another one. And I think that it's hugely important, Ryan, because you imagine how people are, it's around here. Some fans are, they love their Lobos, but when they lose, it's like any fan base. When they lost to the Aggies, the Lobos have reeled off 6 in a row now since they lost to New Mexico State, which seemed like a very bad loss then. And New Mexico's definitely back on track. But this is a game again. I'll liken it to this. Rio Rancho, they're playing Volcano Vista. Rio Rancho in high school, they're ranked like 8 or 9. They're 10-2, but they're playing the defending 3-time champion tonight in the Metro semifinals of the APS tournament. Get your big boy pants on, I wanted to say to Wally Salata, the Rio Rancho coach, who's a very good friend of mine. So New Mexico's got to get their big boy pants on tomorrow, man. This is a good San Diego State team. They bring size. And you said it yourself, Ryan. This is no different than the teams Coach Dutcher has had. Athletic, long length. They're going to. You mentioned it. They play hard. So this is a challenge on your home court. It's not the end of the season if you lose, but a lot of air goes out of the balloon if you do, because you're having the Rick and Ryan, or Rick and Eric are having the bracketology guy on, and previewing tomorrow's game. So I'm not saying it's all or nothing, but if you have a rivalry game and it's 11 o'clock CBS national television, you want to defend home court. There's no doubt about it. So I think it's pretty big.
It's funny how you brought up the Lobos and what they've done since the Aggie game. NMSU, since the Lobo game, lost to Texas on the road, and granted, it's Southern Utah, Northern New Mexico, University of the Southwest, Sam Houston, Louisiana Tech. They've ripped off 6 of 7 and find themselves at 2-0 in the Conference USA standings, atop with the UTEP. So that's pretty impressive. Rivalry makes when they're better, it makes the rivalry stronger. At least I think so. I thought this was funny the other night. San Diego State was down 20-8 to Air Force in San Diego with 11:01 left in the first. They beat they ended up beating Air Force 67-38. And they outscored. I couldn't find the stats. Somebody had posted on Twitter. They had like a 40 or something 2 run, but they outscored San Diego State in the second half 34-14, and then they ended up being up 9 at the half. I love Joe Scott. He's a Jersey guy, but things up there since the last 2 years for Air Force, man, that's rough. So I feel for him, but.
Except when they beat New Mexico here last year.
Yeah, except when they beat and then
man.
Yeah, Ritas Petritis is with Cal. I wanted to switch gears to some football talk, and I never use these, even though it's not really UNM talk. But I'm going to use this here. I don't use those enough, and I was trying to use it to. Get to our next topic, but it didn't work. Congratulations to Danny Gonzales. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday was named? I think it was Tuesday. He was introduced as Arizona's new defensive coordinator. I don't know how I feel about that. I know Brett Brennan cleaned house there But we liked talking with Danny. Obviously, you got to win. He's probably, he had some success as the defensive coordinator at ASU, running the 3-3-5, what Rocky did, the Pac-12 killer, as it's called, when Rocky was at San Diego State. I don't know. Congratulations, Danny. We like Danny. It's probably a biased opinion, but I'm happy to see it. I would, he's probably making more money there as the defensive coordinator than he is as the head coach of UNM. Obviously, he bled cherry and silver. Ed, your thoughts?
You know what? I'm really happy for him. And, you did a great job, by the way, with new head coach Jason Eck the other day.
I'll get
Great
to that.
interview. Yeah.
I'll get to that.
But I think in talking to, when I saw you talk to Coach Eck, it reminded me of when Coach Gonzales was on with us, how friendly, outgoing he was with us. And when you saw him up in the press conferences, hey, Ed, how's it going? Every single time, and he didn't have to do that. No coaches have to talk to you. I get it. But Coach Mendenhall was a good football coach, no doubt about it. And Luke Weissong alluded to that. He did. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But as far as being a seller of the program, I didn't see that. I didn't see it, that he was comfortable here. You kind of made it, he looked miserable. So Coach Gonzales, I'm happy for him. I think he's going to do a great job at Arizona. And maybe someday he'll be back as a head coach of his own program again. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy for him. I think it's pretty cool. Still funny that they opened up, the second game on the road last year a road opener last year was at UofA. To the NFL ranks, and this is the story of the day for me. Per Ian Rappaport, with NFL Network sources, the Jets are spending a portion of today interviewing Maryland head coach Mike Locksley and former Bama OC and current Terps coach gets his another NFL interview. I didn't fuck up reading that. Coach gets his another NFL interview. Rappaport didn't write that. So Locksley got an interview with the Jets. An expansive search has left no stone unturned, taking a look at leader and culture setting in college. If you talk to Maryland fans throughout 3 straight years that they made a bowl game, they weren't as good this year. They didn't have Tua's brother. I don't know. He was really, I'm sure people listening, looking at me, he was really thin-skinned here. What the hell is the New York media going to do to him? That's probably the worst thing ever for him. I'm sure it's a long shot. There's no way in hell he's getting that job. And if he does, then, I can eat my words. But Ed, when you saw that news, what did you think?
You know what? I got to say this. Now, I was not a big fan of his tenure here. It was. Paul Krebs had promised that they were going to add another digit to the scoreboard. We saw how that worked out. It didn't. So, yeah, you know what? And if you look at the Jets this year, and they've been a mess. They thought Aaron Rodgers was going to look. It was horrible. It not just him. He played okay. But the coaching, they're a mess. So there's no way that's going to happen. I don't see that happening at all. They'd be wise to go after Ben Johnson, the one of the coordinators over there at Detroit. But he's wanted by a lot of teams, and he said he's going to be very picky about where he goes. So with Coach Locksley, he's done a good job at Maryland. They've done, they've gone to bowls where they hadn't gone. He didn't do it here, so I just don't. And you talked about the New York media. I still think of Herman Edwards. Hello, we're here to win football games. So just imagine how Coach Locksley would react to some of the questions that are asked by that media. You wouldn't be good.
Unmute myself. Well, I will try to get. Well, I'll ask you your thoughts. Since you weren't able to join us on Wednesday, your thoughts on the interview with Jason Eck. It was a pleasure to talk to him. But I don't know. I'm enthusiastic about it. It's the first time I've been enthusiastic about UNM football. I thought Bronco was a shitty hire. I'm sure what he is behind the scenes. And I know not everybody has to be a darling in front of the cameras, but it just the way he perceived it, I think definitely has rubbed people the wrong way, a lot of people the wrong way. But Ed, I just wanted your thoughts on listening to the interview and what because you helped me out with some of the questions, just your thoughts.
I thought you did a great job. Number one, I love the Lobo up. I love that. I don't know what it means. I've never heard it, but when he said it there,
I think I don't mean to interrupt you. I probably need to. Somebody needs to ask him about it, but I think it's a pop shot at NMSU because they go Aggie up with the gun. So
That's right.
I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? So I love it. But I thought again, he was very respectful. You asked him what kind of personality he's going to bring here. He's excited. He thinks he can do wonder. You asked him about being what would it take for them to be contenders every year, and again, the selling of the program is important. The selling to the community. He feels like he can get the Lobos there, and maybe again, Taka doesn't win football games. I understand that. But I just really enjoyed listening to him. He's had some. You asked him about Barry Alvarez in Wisconsin. What did he learn from him? So he didn't stop. He wasn't a one-word answer guy. He just said he spilled it, man. Spilled the bucket, like they like to say. And I just enjoyed it. I really did, and I'm looking forward to it. But I'm remember I'm the Lobo fan that's always optimistic. Glasses always half full. I'm not a Pollyanna, and I'm going to sit here and tell you they're good when they're not. But I'm excited about what the direction of Lobo football. Saw some more transfers come in today, so he's busy building the roster the way he wants it to be for the personnel and the kind of schemes and things he's going to run. So he's busy. I liked your question about his son's name, and he's got a sense of humor too. His son Maverick. So I think again he's someone that we can look forward to having here. Hopefully more than 1 year. I never would have predicted that Mendenhall would leave after a year, but I've said this again: getting the win. You don't want to be a Lobo. Getting a win, man. He's at Utah State. Good for him. And we've got Jason Eck here, and I'm happy. I couldn't be happier about that.
Just as we sit here on January 10th, the non-conference schedule, August Labor Day weekend, August 30th, at Michigan. Then they get Idaho State, which, if there's such thing as irony. Alanis Morissette. Idaho State is the home opener. Then they're at the Rose Bowl for the UCLA, and then New Mexico State is up here. So, Idaho State, big rivalry there between them. I'm sure most of the nation doesn't know that. But he gets another crack at him. So I'm sure Idaho will appreciate that. For the University of Idaho will appreciate that if UNM can beat Idaho State. To last night, I wanted to hit on this before I turn it over to Eric and Rick and Rocco Miller join the show. Is the not the Peach Bowl, the Orange Bowl, Cotton Bowl kicking off in about an hour between Texas and Ohio State. So we'll complete the championship game. Notre Dame beats Penn State 27-24. I mean, you can pick and choose and say both quarterbacks were ass. I think Riley Leonard's pretty good. He plays quarterback like a point guard. Kind of looked grim there with Penn State up 24-17. Riley Leonard hit, oh goodness, who was it?
Greathouse, I thought.
Yeah, I think it was Greathouse. For a long touchdown pass, they tie the game. They kind of traded blows there, punts. Then Drew Aller throws, pulled a Brett Favre. Why do you even ponder passing? Throws a pick there. And I will say this, the college football playoff might suck. The first round might have sucked. When they introduced the 4-team format, some of the games weren't that good. It took about 2 years ago for the games to get good. If you remember on New Year's Eve, TCU, Michigan, and then Ohio State, Georgia, both games were high scoring, fantastic affairs. The first round was kind of miserable to watch. And I think because it's new, we kind of pick on that. It's not like we've had shitty rounds of NBA playoff. It's not like we've had bad NHL playoffs. I know this is a pretty cliche comment. It's not like we've had bad NFL playoff games. Christ, it took like the Super Bowl, like 23, 24 games until you had a decent game. But what I'm saying is I think that with this format, you probably wouldn't have gotten a Notre Dame Penn State game. The NFL season's over. I'm curious what the ratings were last night. I didn't look. But it was an overall exciting game. A lot of players. You can make all the Jerry Sandusky jokes still. I think Penn State's is just as talented as anybody in the country. James Franklin obviously can't win the big one. That's not a new take. But it was an exciting game, and for the 3 college games that are left, one of them was a dandy. Ed, I wanted your thoughts because it was a great game to watch.
It was, and if you talked about James Franklin, he's 4-20 against teams ranked in the AP top 10, and Paul Feinbaum at ESPN really was on him today about that. I thought Riley Leonard took a big hit, came back, and you mentioned he had some bad moments, but you know what? I liken it. Greyhouse's 3-yard run in the second quarter, fought for every inch. If you think about any given Sunday, that speech by Pacino, by Al Pacino, the coach, we'll fight for every inch. We'll do this and that. What will we do to get that ground? And Notre Dame was the tougher team last night. Christian Gray made a great interception, flipped the field, and then Jeter hits the field goal. Jeter was a transfer as well. So I thought Notre Dame, when they needed to make a play, they made it. You know, it was a great game. It really was very entertaining. Abdul Carter for Penn State, he's great. He had a great game. So I was really, excited about seeing the back and forth, and it went right down to the last second. And when Notre Dame kicked that field goal, there was nothing more Penn State could do. And Notre Dame, if you think about it, playing for their first national title since 1988. And remember how good they were under Lou Holtz, and all the rules had changed and all the the requirements to get into Notre Dame. And now look, the NIL has changed everything, and the Fighting Irish are back in the championship, and that's a long drought, man. But they're playing for their 12th national title, so that's a great moment for Notre Dame football, no doubt.
Well, it comes full circle last night, because I think the last time they were in the Orange Bowl, the last time they were in that stadium was January of 2013, and they got shellacked by Alabama, got bent over.
Badly.
Bad, yeah. And I remember Eddie Lacy in that game, and then Brett Musburger with A.J. McCarron's girlfriend. Look at that lovely lady. I don't know. It's exciting. I'll repeat myself. I don't think we would have gotten that game without the 12 team format. So pretty cool. I went 1 for 1 last night on my bets. I really didn't care for the under, but I took it. I did have Notre Dame money line. So there you go. Pulled even for tonight, and I'm probably going to regret it. I've seen the line go from 6.5. Cotton Bowl, Texas +6. I mean, if you can get it 6.5, great. I think everybody's on Ohio State. For wild card weekend, I like one play. The other rest of the games scare me. I think if you had a bet for the Vikings Rams game, you had to rebet it because location got moved. But I like Chargers -2.5, and it's a tradition like no other. The Texans in the wild card game at 3 Eastern. So, Ed, any other final thoughts before we flip the switch, and I'll throw it over to Eric and Rick, and Rocco Miller will join.
No, I think Ohio State, Texas is going to be a great game tonight, too. Kind of ironic, Will Howard, the quarterback for Ohio State, who transferred from Kansas State, played 3 games, against Ohio State, against Texas, and against Texas, and he lost all 3 of them. It's Texas' first Cotton Bowl in 22 years. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great matchup. I really do. I think I've got Ohio State in this game. I think the way they played. Oh, by the way, too, just real quick, Texas had struggled with pass protection against Georgia, and Ohio State sacked Gilbert 8 times. So keep an eye on that too.
Oh, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, correct?
Dylan Gabriel, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, I will flip it over to a commercial break. Everybody have a safe weekend. I'll throw it over to Eric Moulton, Rick Thompson. Ed, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you Monday. Hopefully you can join me. It'll be Monday afternoon in quarterback with Ned James, probably Ben Wysong. But everybody have a good weekend. Enjoy the game, and enjoy tonight's game, the San Diego State game, and the NFL wild card round. Don't do anything that I would do. So have a good one.
Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
Welcome back to the Pit Press Live. Thanks to Ryan and Ed for kicking off the show this afternoon. But a good transition. I'm joined by Mr. Ricky Thompson all the way from the Bay. What's up, man? How's it going?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Looking forward to a full slate of basketball. Glad the game is early tomorrow so I can watch it while my daughter does ballet, break it down. And then on Tuesday, I'll be attending, hopefully, San Jose State as my first time as a media member at a game. So I'm riding high, pumped up for the Lobos. How are you, man?
I am doing good. I'm excited. We got a special episode or live show on deck this afternoon. Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer.org. Excited to talk to him. He'll be joining us here in a few minutes. I know he was at home getting set up, but I had the pleasure of talking to him at the pit prior to the VCU game. He made the trek all the way from the West Coast to check it out. I think it was his first pit game in person. So, but I think more importantly, I just want to get to know what his brand, what his site, the Bracketeer.org looks like, what it was kind of founded on, how he built it up, and really just kind of get a breakdown look at the Mountain West. I think what we're starting to see come out now more frequently with like the Joe Lenardis of the world is how many Mountain West programs are going to get into the big dance this year. Where does UNM sit? I think I'm most curious to see what what his objective point of view looks like. He travels the country, covers a lot of programs. So really looking forward to kind of picking his brain about that. But before we jump into that, give him a few minutes to get set up there. You and I didn't really get a chance to kind of break down the Wyoming game. I know Rick and Ed touched on it just a little bit, but I'm going to pass it over to you, put you on the spot. What was your overall impression of the Wyoming game?
Just a tale of two halves, as we know. Lobo's defense really making the difference in the second half, and that slowdown style of Sundance Wicks. He finally ran out of time because even when Wyoming was down a couple of points at the end of the game, they refused to shoot a shot early in the clock, basically due to missing their leader, Obi Ogbim. Definitely missed him, and he would have probably made a difference for the Cowboys down the stretch. Can't say enough about the leadership of Dent and Nelly down the stretch. Nelly finally started taking his time on those post moves and going up strong. It's going to be a different story when he goes up against San Diego State tomorrow, but he was really effective against Wyoming. And, I heard Coach Patino and CJ talking at the presser today. It seems like the confidence is high. It's the first time ever the Lobos have been 5-0 in the Mountain West. And for me, Eric, it really just seems like Philly B, CJ, even Jovan off the bench. These guys are all understanding their roles now. They know where they fit in. They kind of know how many minutes they're going to get, and they know what's expected of them. Early in the season, Philly B would catch the ball and kind of look around lost. Now he's either going a ball fake or a quick pass. So that's just the development I see all around. And as a team, the chemistry is really coming together. But the last few games, the bench has kind of been inconsistent. So my question to you, Eric, is who do the Lobos need to step up, going into this weekend, and who do you expect? As I know we got Rocco on now.
Yeah, and before I bring Rocco in, I'll just quickly answer your question. I think it's going to be a collection of guys off the bench, right? I think we're starting to finally see what we can get out of a guy like Philly B once he asserts himself on the floor offensively. We know what we're going to get out of him defensively. He's long, he's 6'9", he's able to guard some of the bigger defenders that in years past would have created some mismatches. But I'm looking at guys like CJ. I don't think that he's getting enough looks. I know he's struggled from the 3-point line recently, but I think he's going to kind of turn that around a little bit. And I'd like for a guy like Braden Applehands to get more looks at the basket. I think Ed mentioned earlier that he didn't really have any shot attempts in that Wyoming game. And to me, as being one of the most high percentage shooters on this Lobo roster, he's got to get more looks at the basket. And it starts from overall game planning and getting the ball into Nelly first and looking to kick out to some of the shooters. So knowing where some of these guys are at, but I don't want to waste any more of Mr. Miller's time. So let me get this transition over and we'll bring him in. Thankful for Mr. Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer.org on joining the Pit Press Live today. Rocco, how's it going, man? Thanks again for coming on.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you? My pleasure. I can't believe we're already in January. Feels like the season just started and games are happening left and right. So it's an exciting time and happy to be joining you guys. How are you today?
Doing great. I think we're excited. It's definitely an exciting part of the year where the college football playoff, we got a good game last night. We have another good one tonight, but now's the time where everyone kind of just starts transitioning 100% of their attention to college hoops, and everyone around the country wants to know what March Madness is going to look like. What are those brackets going to look like? How many bids is my conference going to get this year? And you and I crossed paths at UNM at the Pit a couple of weeks ago when you had a chance to see the VCU game in person. So I guess I'll start there. What was your impression of the Pit, your first Pit game? And it was a good one to be at.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, I got to see the Lobos win. It's always good to see the home folks happy. The Pit has been on my bucket list forever. I'm actually surprised it was my first time. But it was everything I had hoped for and more. just all, knowing all the history. I grew up, of course, like so many people like around our age, where all you see is Jimmy Valvano running around celebrating the title, knowing that's where that happened. Just all the history. I'm a Washington guy originally. We got knocked out of the Sweet 16 in a devastating fashion back in, I think it was 2006 at the Pit against Louisville, who had Dawson Garcia. Louisville went to the Final Four that year instead. That was the only time Washington ever had a number 1 seed. So there's just all these amazing historical memories. Of course, my dad would tell me the Larry versus Magic story, and seeing those highlights hundreds of times growing up. So it's all that on top of, what New Mexico brings to the table, all the recent success as well, being a media member for the last decade plus, and being at a lot of your games in other places like the Mountain West tournament, a lot of your road games out here in California and other places. Amazing that I finally made it there, but it was so cool. Like with the steep tunnel, everybody's so friendly. The way that we pack ourselves in as press members into that little row, I just really enjoyed all of it. So unique.
Yeah, and it is an interesting game, and forgive me if I'm incorrect in my statement here, but we friend of the show, Coach Tom Moser, he has his own podcast, Top of the Mountain podcast. He had you on his show. I want to say maybe it was like around this time last year, but you had some level of involvement with, I guess, maybe starting the conversation of the VCU UNM home and home series. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Well, the Mountain West, WCC, Atlantic 10, where VCU's from, and the American are basically those next 4 best conferences after Power 5. And so many of these schools, New Mexico certainly included, don't get the chance very often. I know they got St. John's and UCLA this year, but in most seasons, you don't get the chance to get a yes from a Power 5 school. So you are trying to schedule up, you are trying to build a resume. But I think the general public doesn't really understand how difficult it is to get a team to agree to that. The next best thing you can do is play each other. So that's why you're seeing, so many games like VCU played Colorado State in Vegas right before that. We're seeing matchups where the WCC will play the Mountain West, especially those upper echelon programs, and the Atlantic 10 and the American. And I'm behind the scenes trying to coordinate different ways for those teams to play. If we can get them a game against the Power 5, even better. But what ended up happening with both VCU and New Mexico that's so much different than most is New Mexico gets incredible home crowds, as you guys know, and so does VCU. So both athletic directors don't want to give up a home game to go play in Vegas if they don't have to, or go play somewhere else like Phoenix or Dallas or wherever it might be. So what I was doing when I was putting the pieces together was like, listen, both VCU and New Mexico need home games. They each get about whatever it is, 12 to 15,000 a night. It's sold out on every game, almost no matter who they play. So it took 2 years, but they finally agreed, and they're doing a home and home. So that I just thought that was an absolutely perfect fit because the needs are the exact same on both sides. So we'll see the Lobos go to VCU next year.
And there's the connection with Ryan Odom too. He was at Utah State, so yeah, he's familiar with the conference. He's familiar with the Lobo. So definitely excited to having that home and home series. Hopefully we can lock up some more matchups like that with other, I guess, equal kind of in the tier level of matchups. But Rick Thompson, a colleague of mine, co-host of the Pit Press, he's out in the San Jose, California area. I want to link you guys up. He'll actually be at the San Jose State game on Tuesday. So not sure if you're planning on.
I'll be one of the 500 there probably. But yeah, Rocco, I saw you at Mountain West Media Days. They had you guys up on the podium, so I couldn't get to you. We were across from John Rothstein. But when you're talking about these teams like a VCU and a New Mexico, where it's super hard to get bigger schools to come play them in the non-con, I've heard you talk about that before. And then, looking at how the Mountain West went to a 20-game schedule and kind of eliminating 2 opportunities, I just wondered if you could comment on New Mexico fans understand how hard it is to get big schools to come to Albuquerque and play, and why that is. And then, does it hurt in the Mountain West this year actually having more conference games than non-conference games?
Yeah, great questions. I would say to your first question, the reason why it's so difficult is the way power programs approach their schedule is, for the most part, they either want to play home games or they'll go play an event. They want a handful at most. And again, I think you look at Auburn, Alabama, Duke, some of those big time teams in the top 10 right now that have coaches that are in very good shape. And, Tom Izzo can go play whoever he wants. Bruce Pearl can play whoever he wants. Nate Oates is very unique because he's just taken on that attitude from day one. But most coaches are very concerned about losing their job. And, we saw coming into this season across Division I, there was a record 67 new head coaches. So, looking from the outside in as more of a consultant for them, I totally respect that and get that. It's their livelihood. I can't force them to play a game if it doesn't make sense for them. And I think that's also part of the problem is everybody has full legislation, jurisdiction on if they play a team or not. There's no governing body saying you have to play this. So a trip to the pit is a loss on paper for most teams. And when you're scheduling, you're looking at the analytics. Is it a win on paper? Is it a 50-50 chance? Is it like a 40-60 chance? So even for power schools going to the pit, a lot of them would be like a 40-60 or 50-50 at best, unless they're one of those top 10 to 15 programs. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is the last thing they want to do is come down there and lose. And then New Mexico maybe fall in the Mountain West where they can take losses to teams like, theoretically a Fresno, an Air Force, a team at the bottom of the league, right? So you certainly don't want to take that risk because that could mess all the power numbers up. And so there's just a lot of manipulation around who to play and why and who not to play, which is why I was very impressed. Patino used his power to get UCLA in Vegas early, and that really paid off, of course, with the win. And then that crack at St. John's. That's why you saw New Mexico get those, but most teams in the Mountain West didn't get those chances. So it is unfortunate. But yeah, and then the second part of your question, I'm sorry, can you repeat the second part real quick again?
The Mountain West Conference going from 18 to 20 games. Does that actually hurt the team's chances this year?
Yeah, in my opinion, it does a little bit because when you had 18, you could control a lot of the, top not having to play the very bottom. So, for example, San Diego State last year only had to play Air Force once. I think that's smart. You're not helping a San Diego State or whoever wins the league by having them play an Air Force who's closer to 300 than 200. And, now this year, Fresno, unfortunately, is down there with them. You also have the risk of like a San Jose State or a Wyoming, if things don't go well, being down in that neighborhood. We saw San Jose State fall apart last year. Obviously, injuries were killer for them. But when it comes to bracketology and selection and building a resume, the harsh reality is once a game drops into the fourth quadrant, one of the easiest things for a committee member to do is ignore all the results in quad 4. So basically you have a nothing to gain game and everything to lose. And it's more ways than one. It's not just the win or the loss. If you don't win that game by 10 or more, you're actually hurting yourself still because your net's going to go down just for winning by 6 or 7 or less. So there's a lot of, in my opinion, there's a lot of downside with playing everybody twice. I understand what it stemmed from. Utah State got that championship last year without having to play Nevada more than once. Steve Alford, of course, made a big stink about that. And so yeah, like I get it for the race, but in reality, the bigger picture for the league, the bigger pie to go after is getting as many Mountain West teams into the tournament as possible. And they threw 6 into that sucker with like a straight flush last year. I don't think that's going to happen again. I hope it does, but it's they nailed that last year, and they should be doubling down on that strategy.
Before I start transitioning more into like UNM specific talk, eye test, and then bracketology is just a popular term used nowadays. I think a lot of people resonate with it. Can you talk about what you've created, kind of where your idea to create Bracketeer.org came from? I think a lot of people are real familiar with the Joe Lunardi's of the world, but you might have kind of a different vision of what that looks like. You might have a different way of looking at the metrics. Can you elaborate on what you've done to develop and kind of promote Bracketeer? And then I think you put out something on Twitter today that you're going to release your first bracket on the 13th of this month. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I appreciate you saying that. Monday will be the first forecast. And, one of the things, the principles I have in terms of going through the process is I go through the full process of evaluating any potential at-large team. And then, of course, comparing all the projected automatic qualifiers as well. And if you thoroughly do that, which I'm probably one of the few people out there crazy enough to do it, but I like to be thorough in what I do. It's minimum 5-hour exercise, usually closer to 7 or 8 hours. So it does take like all Sunday night into Monday morning to get that wrapped up. And then you got to publish it right. And it can spill into Tuesday pretty quickly if you're not careful. So I've had to master that over the years. But the reason it started, I'm so glad you asked, Bracketeer to make a difference is like many people who are part of, my generation. I'm in my early 40s. We grew up with Lenardi, or we were teenagers when Lenardi got popular. He came up with this bracketology idea, which, until I fully invested in it, publicly, I personally did it privately for several years on the scratch paper at home. And my neighbors and friends would be like, Rocco, you're just as good as him, or you're doing better than him. What's going on? So when Twitter started in 2010, I basically created my profile based on that being the center. So that way I can pay attention to all college basketball. I've always viewed the sport that way anyway. So everything I've done is organic with how I've seen it my whole life. And what I found was, through the Lenardi boom and making this whole topic popular, was that there's just not a lot of education in it. There's all this talk like Lenardi's got us a 5 today, and we're going to Seattle for the first 2 games. If we win those, we'll make it to San Francisco. And then that just becomes fact. There's no there's no why behind it, and half the fans don't care. They just want to know. Which is great for what I do. There's the simplicity that makes it fun like that. You just want to have that daydream for the day and then move on to the next game and then come back and check it again after that game's over. Now where are we at, right? So I get all that. But I think a lot of the public as well is interested in the why. And that's where I started all my work, was just starting to understand what the committee actually talks about, how the committee decisions get made, to realize this is not just one person sitting there with all these numbers in front of them and making the decisions on their own, which a lot of bracketologists will do. And I think if you invest too much time trusting those opinions, you can fall into some inaccuracies. And I think the way you have to look at it is, well, if a group of people are looking at New Mexico and that same group of people is looking at VCU, they're going to compare and contrast. And these are the things they're going to care about. And so anyway, long story short is, over the years, I've developed relationships with people who serve on the committee, who used to serve. Now they're going to be serving in the future. Anybody I can meet with. And fortunately, I've been able to build those connections and double check my work. So that way I stay as one of the top accurate bracketologists. And, in some of the articles, I can't do it every single time I post. But in some of the articles, and you'll see in this first one, I'll have a lot of background as to how the bracket came together. That way, the people that have a little bit more of an interest in it and want to understand how we came to the final answers will have a little bit better of a foundation around it. And we're not just putting up matchups to put up matchups. It's just actually, when you follow the process to a T, which is how I do it, it will play itself out. And the cool thing is, you'll always have those really ridiculous matchups. They're never made up. They just come together organically.
I really appreciate the time that it takes to gather that information, the people and the network that you have to build in order to get that feedback on the accuracy. And I'm interested to know, and maybe it's a little teaser kind of into what you're releasing on next week, but from, I guess, a top 3 priority list, like what the board is looking at. How do they prioritize? Like, what are they looking at kind of from a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, as far as building a profile for a potential at-bid or at-large team?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of ways to slice that. So I think when you're looking at the very top of the board and you're competing for a number 1 seed or a 2 seed, it's basically like you're stacking up what I call pieces of gold or pieces of silver. So if you're Auburn and you go beat Tennessee and you beat Alabama, and they lost to Duke, but in the SEC they could build up all these big wins, and at a certain point, Auburn, for example, could get to a point where nobody could ever pass them in a comparison because they've got all these wins in the bag and you can't take them away from them. So at the top of the board, it's really just about just stacking those big wins over and over again. And if you're like a Gonzaga and you're trying to get up to number one around all those power teams, you really just have to be almost perfect. And if you can get like the Ken Palm, we've seen Gonzaga do it before, where like Ken Palm has them number one, the net itself has them number one. That's another path. And, the sad part about that part of it is that's just coming down if you can beat San Diego by 60 instead of by 30, which is really not saying you're a better team. It just shows you can blow teams out more if you leave your starters in all 40 minutes. So the top of the board is really about just those big power numbers, and then the rest of the stuff still matters. Like you can't take a lot of losses. You can't lose too many games on the road. A lot of teams will lose, like average teams will go 500 or worse on the road. So you still have to show your merits that way. But once the merits are in place, we'll probably end up with 20 really solid teams, and then the power takes over from there. But once we get into what I think you were really asking about, who belongs in, who belongs out, that becomes a lot more about the games and the wins or loss results versus beating a team by 20 or not. And so I still really do appreciate that part, because it tells me the committee more often than not will get the right 68. Again, they're going to probably make a mistake or two, but at least get 66 out of the 68 right. And so that's where I kind of can defend them, because they are looking, through a fine-tooth comb for all the different ingredients. Like, who did you beat away from home? How did the game happen? Who was out? Who was available? When you're that close to the bubble, all those things factor in. And of course, the basic things like your quad 1 record, your quad 2 record, your quad 3 record. Again, we kind of ignore quad 4, but then you go into your non-conference strength of schedule. What happened away from home? And then I think for the bigger schools, here's how it really breaks down is like we saw this in the Big 12 the last handful of years. You'll see it in the SEC this year and probably the Big 10 this year, where you get too far below 500 in your league, it's going to throw your top 1 quad, your top 2 quad record pretty significantly below 500. So a lot of people are going crazy right now about the SEC maybe getting 12 or 13, but I'll tell you the math right now likely will not allow anything higher than 11 SEC teams, because if they go 6 and 12 or worse in the league, the math won't work for them in those columns. And that's going to be like a de facto eliminator, and that's going to help the New Mexicos and the Boise States that are looking to pass those teams. So we have a lot of math that's going to come into play that's going to help a Mountain West a little bit when it comes to the bubble. But there are about 18 different categories to compare teams if you want kind of a macro sense of how it all goes down.
Right, and this is the first year we're really seeing these mega conferences, right, and how that'll play out with all these new teams in them, and how it's going to affect the smaller ones. But kind of focusing in on back in the Mountain West, I don't know where you had Utah State ranked at the beginning of the year, but I don't think anyone probably expected them to be a tournament team, even a genius basketball guy like you. But what teams have stood out to you in the conference besides maybe the top 3? Are there any others like a Boise? Can they still make a run? I've seen New Mexico, and we'll want to ask about them on the bubble and most. Has anything stood out to you about the Mountain West Conference schedules that might have hurt them or helped them to this point?
Yeah, well, I think Utah State's the place to start in the league. They've only got the 1 loss. And fortunately, so far, UC San Diego is still very strong. So that loss is not hurting at all. And if UC San Diego finishes strong, they'll have nothing to worry about there. But I think the reason why Utah State is so firmly above water is the road win at St. Mary's, of course, the road win at San Diego State, and then they went and picked up a road win at Nevada. So all 3 of those are going to be big time for them when we get to the finish line, no matter what happens between now and then. So if they find themselves in the bubble after a cold streak somewhere in February, that's still going to help them quite a bit to getting in. So that's huge for the league. San Diego State, of course, had some great non-conference wins themselves. I think they're in solid footing so far, and certainly on their typical trajectory to be a tournament team. And I think after that, New Mexico's probably next. New Mexico, and we could go into more detail here in a minute, but right now there's enough reasons to include them. and I haven't gone through the full exercise again. That's coming Monday, but and it's so early, so I'm not too concerned about it at this point. But right now, you could look at everything New Mexico has, and you could live with putting them in, and I think that's a good sign because they've played 9 meaningful games above quad 4, and they're 7-2 in those games. They've got the UCLA win in quad 1. They're under 500 in what I call the top 2A quad. It's a big bubble separator. So obviously, once they get a couple more opportunities at those upper echelon games, they can fix that with some wins. But after that, they're great. They're 5-2 across all of quad 2, 7-2 across the meaningfuls. Of course, the big pain in the butt is the New Mexico State loss. I don't want to harp on that too much.
Can you actually comment? I've seen a lot of fake bracketologists on my Twitter saying, "Oh, New Mexico State is getting better and better, and that's actually helping New Mexico because that win doesn't look as bad." Can you explain that, and is that true?
It's true because that loss now is about to come out of quad 4 and into quad 3, which means you won't have a black eye anymore. It just means you'll have an extra loss in a meaningful game. That record would go from 7-2 to 7-3, but that of course helps because one of the newer metrics that are going to be listed on the team sheet for the first time this year is what's called wins above bubble. And I don't want to get into all the calculations because it'll confuse everybody, but basically what it says is every time you win a game, it's worth X amount of weight. So if you beat a bad team, it's worth we'll just call it a penny, right? But it's still worth something. If you beat a really, really good team, it might be worth a quarter or 50-cent piece, something much bigger. If you lose a game and if you lose a bad game, it goes the opposite way, right? If you lose to a really good team, you might only lose a penny. If you lose to a bad team like New Mexico State appears to be on paper so far, that's a heavier, way down your wins above bubble. So that's the WAB you'll see on the team sheets. Again, it's only one of 6 metrics listed, so I don't want to overemphasize, but I think that's a fair way to say it because as New Mexico State improves, if that continues and they get into the top half of their league or stay in the top half of their league, that the weight of that loss will hurt less and less. So as crazy as it is to say, Lobo fans should be Aggies fans the rest of the year. I know that's unfathomable, but we'll do our best with that. And outside of that, I think New Mexico still has everything in front of them, right? You look at the schedule, home San Diego State, you're going to Boise, you're going to Utah State. Utah State's coming to you. You're hosting Boise later, and you're going to Nevada. All those games are going to be premium games. So, I think I just listed 6 key games left. Certainly go 4-2. I think you're in. 3-3, you're probably nervous. But that's how it shapes up so far.
So I have a double-ended, or I guess 2-part question for you. And I am going to take just kind of a look back at last year. One, a lot of people focus so much on the net that it's almost like the golden rule, right? And one, I want to get your take on how valuable is the net? How much do people actually weigh in on it that actually kind of determines the outcome on some of the seeding? And then 2, with what happened last year to the Mountain West. Yes, they did get in 6 teams, but I feel like, and I'm not saying you specifically, but just some of the bracket specialists or people that focus had the Mountain West teams ranked or seeded so much higher than what they got, right? Everyone was a little bit shocked that Boise State got into the play-in game. Colorado State got the play-in game. UNM was seeded a little bit too high and got a really bad matchup with Clemson. And then you look at San Diego State, got the 5 seed, and it didn't make sense to a lot of people. And you could imagine the uproar that caused within the conference and just those fan bases. So first question is kind of where's your thought process sitting with the overall net and how impactful is it? And then 2, what was your reaction to last year's seeding with the Mountain West teams and where they got placed?
Yeah, thank you. So the net itself, and this is where there can be a lot of confusion with it, is all about your opponent, not yourself. So you want your opponent's nets to be as good as possible, which is why after you play a team, you're always rooting for them to win, like that New Mexico State example we just used. So what the team sheet does is sort your opponent's net by results, and that's what defines a quad 1 versus a 2 versus a 3. And in the team sheets right now, and it started 2 years ago, quad 1 and quad 2, they actually cut it in half. So you have a 1A, a 1B, a 2A, 2B. And to this day, I've watched games on TV every day like you guys have. They still have not carved it up the way the committee actually views it, which is a little bit of like not great information, I would say. But that's why I gave that 2-3 record for New Mexico in the top 2A, because that's a great cutoff for about where the actual at-large cutoff will be when you look at, those being, I think it's top 39 neutral court games, top 30 home, etc. So top 60 road. So again, my point is it's all about your opponent's data, right? So it doesn't hurt to have your own net be awesome, but New Mexico's could have been a tragedy last year. They were 22 in the net, and I talked to multiple committee members, and the committee was prepared to leave them out of the tournament. So your own net doesn't get you anything. Indiana State was another team. I think most of the public, especially those of us that love non-power conference basketball,
should have got in.
They were in the, I think, 29 or 30th, and they weren't getting in either. New Mexico was closer than them. So your own net is something not necessarily to focus on if you're rooting for a team. If you're a Lobo fan, focus on everybody else's net in the league, and you want the rest of the league to be as good as possible. You want your best wins. You want those teams to continue improving their net. So that's what I'd say about that. And then on the the second part was the Mountain West.
The seeding from last year. Just
yes.
People thinking that the teams are going to get a little bit better than where they ended up.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, yeah, exactly. So my reaction to everything was I was surprised. Everything you said I was in line with for the most part. San Diego State, I knew why they held up, because they had non-conference damage. They won road games in non-conference that the rest of the league did not have. So that part I agreed with. And it made perfect sense. But everybody else, the one that really got me was Nevada, actually. I had them, I think, a 7 seed, and they landed as a 10, which, again, in the world of the bracket, it's the same game. You're in a 7-10, but obviously you would rather play a 10 than a 7. So they had Nevada totally flipped on my book. And out of every team on the board, I don't think I missed on any team more than 2 seeds. That was the only one I missed by 3. And you can see my results on the bracket matrix. I was pretty close on almost everybody. That one really threw me off. I thought Colorado State and certainly Boise State having to go to a play-in didn't make a lot of sense. I thought there was a handful of other teams that you could easily justify sending them to the play-in. So first of all, I thought both of them were clear of the play-in. They both end up in the play-in. And so, from a bracket standpoint, that's frustrating. From an opportunity to advance further into the tournament, that's frustrating. But if you're Gloria Navarez, who's the Mountain West commissioner, yeah, you kind of like it. You know why? Because if they win those games, those are full financial units for the league. So you don't know what was going on behind the scenes. Maybe the Mountain West politic to get into those games so they can try to get more wins. There's also the Mountain West reputation of can't win in the tournament. So maybe trying to beat some of that. So I don't know what happened behind the scenes with that part of it, but just from where the teams actually belong, doing it the true way, I thought they both were underseeded for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have considered the league politicking to get certain matchups, or at least getting more chances at winnable games. So that's an interesting take. Speaking of big winnable games, the games that you talked about, stacking your pockets with those gold chips or those silver chips, UNM has one tomorrow. They host San Diego State on Big Boy CBS at 11 a.m. our time. I'm assuming you're probably going to be tuning in, but have you had many opportunities to watch San Diego State play?
Yeah, I've seen them a little bit, and I know their personnel pretty well. I followed Florida Atlantic for the last couple of years during their run, and obviously San Diego State had their classic game against them. But now, I think one of their heart and soul players is Nick Boyd. Certainly watch out for Nick. He's the guy when games get tight. He wants the moment. He wants to defend the best player. So we'll see if he goes up against Dent in a tight game down the stretch. But Miles Bird's extremely talented. Jared Coleman-Jones I watched a lot, not only early this year, but when he was at Middle Tennessee. Magoon Gwath looks like a crazy freak athlete of a freshman. And BJ Davis has been kind of their big surprise this year, I guess you could say. Just big jump from his freshman year where he didn't play much to now being a big-time part of the success at San Diego State. And Wayne McKinney's a good veteran, so they will give you guys a battle as always. I think maybe the good thing is they got the big road win at Boise last Saturday. And, you know how the season flows. It's always game to game. And, since they got that big road win already in conference, maybe you won't get their 100% best effort. But obviously it's San Diego State, and you're going to have to deal with the tenacious rebounding, the tenacious defending. And I'm sure the Pitt's going to be rocking. But what are your guys' thoughts?
I'm scared of San Diego State's defense. They're very long, big inside. They got Farrell Compton paired with Gwath, so they can throw those two huge freshmen at Nelly Jr. Joseph. And I think if the Lobos get in any type of foul trouble, San Diego State is just a little bit deeper at this point, and they just have a little bit more consistency, it seems. So I think for the Lobos, they're going to see the defense sagging down off of Dent and coming down to help that pick and roll with Nelly. So who on the Lobos is going to knock down shots? If they can do that, I think Lobos win. If they can't, it's going to be much more challenge. What do you think, Eric?
I'm going to have to sit with you. San Diego State has been notoriously one of the best defensive teams in the country. They're extremely long, physical, athletic. They protect the rim really well. So, they're going to look to take away those high pick and roll screens with Donovan Dent and Nelly. So that kind of almost forces UNM to not settle from the outside, but I think they're going to have to get some contributions from some of the shooters. I'm looking at guys like Braden Applehands, CJ Nolan, guys like Amzil. UNM's not coming off of a really good performance at Wyoming. Halfway through the first half, they were 1 for 16, real night shooting the ball. So I'm looking for them to kind of get out to a much better start. UNM plays much better once the pace of the game actually starts to pick up. Not really what San Diego State does. So really looking to see who's going to impose their will first, how fast of a game this is going to get played. And UNM's going to have to sit in the half court and actually run some offense and see if they can get some buckets and get Donovan Dent and other guys involved. So definitely can't get another game that Amzil had last one, 0 points, 2 rebounds. They're going to have to get contributions from all around, including the bench. So that's what I'm looking for, kind of a more well-rounded approach to this one. They're going to need it.
Do you think the Aztecs have any kind of revenge on their mind from the Mountain West Championship game, or do you think that was just forget about it because everybody got into the tournament?
I feel like the San Diego State UNM rivalry has kind of picked up over the last couple of years. Yeah. I know that San Diego State has a much hated approach to Jalen House, right? He was kind of like the Joker last year. I don't know if UNM has that type of player this year that they can kind of build that focus on, but it definitely has that feeling, that esque of a typical Mountain West top game rivalry. I think it truly exists. And I mean, looking 2 years ahead, I'm really sad to see some of these rivalry games go away. But I think the Pit's going to be alive tomorrow. It's going to be a stripe out. I think earlier in the show, Ryan had identified there might be just under 1,000 tickets left. So it should be close to 15,000 at sellout. And it's going to get loud. It's going to be crazy. CBS will be there.
It's an early start too, right? 11 a.m. Local.
Early start. Yeah. And they're going to get the full CBS NFL playoffs kind of leading up throughout the game, like right into that. So you're going to have essentially the whole country watching. So really good time for the Lobos to kind of expose themselves to the rest of the world. And hopefully they have a good turnout, and the rest of the country will get to find out who Donovan Dent is.
Agreed. I think they will. That's my bold prediction. Is the country's going to find out who Donovan Dent is. They should know by now. We've been doing our best to get him out there. The guy's incredible.
Yeah. But Rick, do you have anything else? Any questions before I let Rocco
No, Rocco, grateful to have you on. Hopefully, I can meet you someday down here in the Bay when you're at a game around here. I'll try to bother you. Um, but I just wanted to know, were you a big statistics guy before you got into this? Like, did you study statistics and things of that nature?
Good question. Not anything in school, but I would say, since I was probably 4 years old, my dad had me memorize all sorts of stuff that I would never do to, like, if I don't have kids, but if I did, I wouldn't do that to them. But it's the way I was brought up. I was always writing down different types of numbers, equations that related to sports. I memorized, I think it was every NFL team, what quarterback was their starter and what college the quarterback went to by the time I was 4. And I mean, again, like, I knew that stuff before I knew the alphabet very well. So it was always just, getting quizzed all the time, every day. And, I started going my own way with it once I was old enough. And college basketball was a big deal early, because when I was 7, the Final Four came to Seattle, where I grew up. And that was just such an amazing exposure to the national sport, not just, and we had the Washington Huskies, but most of the time in my upbringing, they were bad. They were one of the worst Pac-10 teams every year. So we always had, like, me and all my friends, we had our national teams. I liked Syracuse. I had a North Carolina friend, a Kansas friend, a Michigan friend. So we were always talking about who's going to win the title, who's going to go to the Final Four, who's going to make it to Seattle. So I feel bad that the kids there now don't have the Kingdome, because they tore it down in '99. But I got 2 Final Fours growing up, and we got an amazing Elite 8 with the Fab 5 that came in '93. And my dad took me to all that stuff. So I think it just got me completely locked in with the sport. And then, from college and after, I've been as involved as I possibly can, just getting my hands on everything.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. You bet.
One last question that's a little unrelated, but with the Seattle talk, my wife actually lived in Seattle for 7 or 8 years.
Oh, nice.
Big time. She was there during the whole Sonics debacle when they left.
Oh,
so
man. That's a sore subject.
It is a sore subject, but it is being talked about again. I mean, what do you think? Are they going to bring an NBA team back to Seattle? And if they do, are they going to keep the Sonics name?
They will keep the Sonics name, because that was part of the deal when they left. They got to keep all the colors and the logo and the name. That's why they had to, when they got to Oklahoma, they had to change all that. But I've been hearing, and I actually do think it's going to happen now, because Silver's been working on it, and the arena's there and all that stuff. But it's just been frustrating personally, because when they left originally, the promise then was they would get a team within 5 years, and last I checked, it's now been 17. So it's just, I just feel it's not for me. I've never been a huge NBA guy, but I went to those games growing up, and it was awesome to have Jordan come to town and all those things that I'm nostalgic about. People my age are nostalgic about. But I just feel bad that 17 years worth of generations and counting through, the Seattle area didn't get those opportunities that I got. And so when and if they get the team back, it'll be really, really amazing for the city. And I think the rest of the country doesn't realize how important basketball is to Seattle. You see so many players make the NBA from the area. It rains all the time. We're always indoors playing hoops. Basketball culture is huge in the city, and certainly deserve an NBA team. And it was a tragedy when they got taken away.
Yeah, guys like Sean Kemp, the Glove, Gary Payton.
Yeah,
UNM just signed a point guard out of the.
He's amazing.
Out of the Seattle area too.
He just dropped 61 points the other night. Yeah,
And like 15 assists.
Man, yeah. There's some hometown friends of mine that are upset that he got away from Washington. So that'll be an interesting story to follow over the years coming up.
Yeah. But Rocco, thanks again, man, for taking time to sit with us here at the Pit Press. It was a pleasure meeting you in person at the Pit. We follow your stuff. We're happy to share the info you have coming out Monday. I'll give you an opportunity to share with us and our viewers kind of what you have coming out on the 13th, where people can find your website, what to look forward to, and I guess your kind of overall plan kind of leading up to March Madness. Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you at the Pit as well, and thanks for having me on. Happy to do this anytime you guys
I want to talk hoops. So on Monday, first full bracket forecast will be there. I'll have a lot more detail than usual in terms of how the bracket came together, things I'm seeing this year, some of the stuff we actually touched on here on this episode in terms of the macro issue, how many bids the SEC can realistically get, how many bids from the Big 10 and Big 12, because that speaks to the entire picture for this year's bracket, for how many bids are left over for even the ACC, and then, of course, Mountain West, Atlantic 10, WCC, and onward from there. So all of that will be covered in Monday's article. We have a meeting with Field of 68 next week. I'm on their Fielding the 68 show. So that should be starting, I think, in 2 weeks, and that will be every Monday and Friday at 5 Eastern. So that's 3 Mountain, 2 o'clock Pacific for Rich and I. And so that's always a great show because we have a whole hour to dive through the bracket, why teams are at the top, why teams are on the bubble, what we're seeing, what we're thinking. And it's myself and 3 other expert bracketologists. And then I'm also on Field of 68 on a show called the Mid-Major Show with Sean Paul. We've actually already interviewed Jason Hooten there from New Mexico State. It does not incorporate the Mountain West, but we cover basically all the leagues below the Mountain West. So if you're curious what's going on in Conference USA, the WAC, etc., we got you covered on that show. And that usually drops on either Tuesday or Wednesday. We just post the link, and we also have a podcast version for both those shows. So all that's going on. And then I'll be on the road infrequently, heading out to Charlotte to see Memphis next Sunday. And I'll be on the East Coast for about a week, and then just figuring out week to week all the way till March. March Madness, no set plans yet, but probably end up in San Francisco for the regional since it's right here in the backyard. They did a great job in 2022 when Duke came through with Coach K's last run. So it'll be really cool to have them host again. Other than that, I'll keep you posted as we go, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks again. Maybe we'll bug you here in the next couple of weeks
after
the whole conference kind of gets through the whole first half of playing, just to kind of see where everyone aligns and get your thoughts. But again, Mr. Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer.org. Man, safe travels. Enjoy all those games, and hopefully you'll have a chance to check out another Mountain West game. And if you haven't yet, try to get out to the Mountain West tournament. That's a good one to be at. Definitely exciting. So
absolutely. I've done the last couple actually. So look forward to getting back.
Okay. Sounds good. Maybe we'll link up. But Rick, you have anything else before we go?
No, just happy to have another Bay Area guy on here for once, so I'm not all alone with the Albuquerquean. So thanks again, Rocco.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Signing out. Thanks, Rocco. Appreciate your time.
Take care.